Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. I came across an interesting list of misogynistic movies. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but thought I would look at one of them, which just happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies. And that movie is Alien. There may be spoilers ahead if you haven't seen Alien, but I assume most of you have, and if you haven't, you should be asking yourself, why the fuck not, right about now? Well folks, you really should strap yourselves in, because this is going to be a crazy ride into the more crazy aspects of the feminist mind. I guess, your normal average person might consider Alien as a movie about female empowerment and strength. I mean, let's look at Ripley. She constantly speaks her mind, she is fearless, intelligent, in no way is she weak, or ever plays the victim card. And while everyone else on the crew gets killed off one by one, she manages to kill the alien, and survive for the sequels to come. I guess, your normal average person would look at a character like Ripley, and think, there's a positive role model for women. Right? Well, apparently, you would be wrong, at least according to the 10 films that are secretly misogynist list, which has Alien as number 4. But let's not pass judgment yet, let's keep an open mind and see what they have to say. As seminal to the horror genre as Alien may be, it is fundamentally a film that promotes the demonization of women. All of the horror in the film comes from a source that is misogynistic in nature. The feminine is constructed as monstrous here and it is ever present. The sphere of the feminine can be felt throughout the film, in the gigantic arching open legs of the crashed alien ship, in the vaginal maw that the crew enter it from, in the forced and fatal impregnation of John Hurt, in the name of the onboard ship computer, Mother. But nowhere more than in the alien itself, all-toothed vagina dentate and feminine physique. It is the film's physical embodiment of the fear of women. Okay, let's break this down, shall we? As seminal to the horror genre as Alien may be, it is fundamentally a film that promotes the demonization of women. All of the horror in the film comes from a source that is misogynistic in nature. The feminine is constructed as monstrous here and it is ever present. Okay, so far nonsense, but let's look at the author's reasoning anyway. The sphere of the feminine can be felt throughout the film, in the gigantic arching open legs of the crashed alien ship, in the vaginal maw that the crew enter it from, in the forced and fatal impregnation of John Hurt, in the name of the onboard ship computer, Mother. Let's start with the crashed alien ship, designed by Swiss surrealist H.R. Giger. Giger is easily my all-time favorite artist. I have many of his art books, and I know his work very well. One theme that constantly appears in his work is sexuality, albeit twisted and dark. It is very common to find not only penis or vagina shapes hidden in his work, but clearly defined penises and vaginas openly on display. The punk band, the Dead Kennedys, even got in trouble with the law over a Giger painting in poster format, within their Frankenchrist album. But that in itself is a topic for another day, if I ever get around to tackling censorship, and the media. The point is, that you don't have to look very hard into Giger's artwork, to find something sexual, or vagina-like, or penis-like. And I don't think this promotes the demonization of women, any more than it promotes the demonization of men. But let's look at the author's specific claims. Firstly, that the ship represents a pair of giant open female legs. I have honestly never even considered this, as I doubt most sane people would have. If we look at a model of the ship, we can easily conclude that the only way these could be considered legs, is if they were greatly misshapen and deformed legs. My legs definitely don't look like that, nor do the legs of anyone I've ever seen. Personally, I think a much more reasonable and logical conclusion would be that the ship was designed to look totally alien, designed to look like nothing made by man, and also designed to give the impression of great size. But what about the vagina-like opening they enter through, as the author claims? Well, there are actually 3 openings next to each other, and yes, they do look a little vagina-like, which is not at all surprising considering H.R. Geiger's style. But if we are meant to believe that the ship is a gigantic pair of legs, and this is the vagina between those legs, then why is there 3 of them? Being someone who has seen his fair share of vaginas, both actual and pictorial, I don't ever remember seeing a triple vagina before. I will admit to having a curiosity to see one though, purely scientific curiosity I assure you. But moving on. The forced and fatal impregnation of John Hurt. Okay, how exactly does the impregnation of a male by an alien parasite promote the demonization of women? I will get back to this one sometime later in the video, because a different author has more to say about it. Which brings us to the name of the human ship's computer, Mother. Once again, I'm somewhat baffled how naming a ship's computer, Mother, somehow promotes demonization of women? Does the ship's computer not take care of them, protects them, while they are in hypersleep? I fail to see how this is in any way demonization. But nowhere more than in the alien itself, all-toothed vagina dentate and feminine physique, it is the film's physical embodiment of the fear of women. Vagina dentate? Really? The alien's mouth is meant to be a vagina with teeth? My advice to anyone who ever comes across a vagina that looks like an alien's mouth would be to run. Seriously, just get the fuck out of there. And if you are watching this, and your vagina resembles the mouth of an alien, then I would recommend to seek medical help immediately, because it's not meant to look that way. But seriously, are we really meant to believe that the alien's mouth symbolizes a vagina with teeth? Really? Wouldn't it make more sense to conclude that maybe, just maybe, it's just meant to be a mouth with big scary teeth? You know, sometimes a train entering a tunnel is just a fucking train entering a tunnel. No hidden meaning needed. And as for the alien having a feminine physique, well, this is just another strange claim considering there was a guy in the suit. His name is Balaji Badejo, and the reason he was chosen to play the alien is because he is 7'2". Ridley Scott believed that Badejo, at 7 feet 2 inches and with a slender frame, could portray the alien and look as if his arms and legs were too long to be real, creating the illusion that there could not possibly be a human being inside the costume. But apparently 7'2" with a slender frame is typical feminine physique, at least according to the author of this list. But let's look at the design itself. You would think that if the alien is meant to be feminine, there would at least be breasts, you know, like another alien designed by Geiger, for the movie Species. Clearly the alien from Species is meant to be female, and has female features, but the same can't be said for the alien from the movie Alien. In fact, its head, in very typical Geiger style, looks very penis-like, even more so if you look at his designs. Now does that mean it's meant to be a giant penis? The answer is no, it's just typical of Geiger's style. Next. Alien is the most subtle of misogynistic films. Its female characters fare no worse than its males and one of them even survives. But it is a film full to the brim of femininity as the source of its horror. If what scares an audience scares a nation, then America truly fears women. Yeah, what a load of bullshit. This just goes to show that an ideological poisoned mind can twist anything out of shape and find delusional hidden meanings. Alien is a movie with a strong female character, a character I greatly like and respect by the way, who acts as an equal to those around her, and expects no special treatment. She is the only survivor, all the other crew members, mainly male, die. Yet through sheer guts and intellect, she manages to defeat the threat and live. But this is somehow twisted into female demonization. Fucking amazing. So after reading this feminist criticism of Alien, I wondered to myself if this was just one lone feminist loon, or if there were other feminists who found Alien to be misogynistic. So I did a Google search and found an article which was even worse, believe it or not. It's titled, Reassessing Alien, Sexuality and the Anxieties of Men. Oh boy, this is going to be fucking bad, don't say I didn't warn you. Anyway, let's get stuck into it. In the 30 years since its release, Alien has become a film of hot debate amongst film theorists. Academic analyses of the film draw attention to many differing themes that lead to feminist, Marxist, psychoanalytic, and other readings. But these theories exist in a vacuum of their own space, playing to each author's pet theories rather than looking to analyze the film from the screen and then out. Most critiques, academic and otherwise, ultimately conclude that Alien is a feminist film because of its representation of the workplace as a home to equality and a place where traditional gender roles have been obliterated. But there's something else lingering under the surface: fear. Not the fear of the devouring alien, but a fear and anxiety of a future where the equalizing of the sexes might lead to the blending of sexual biology as well. What is ultimately revealed by Alien is the anxiety of men during the era of second-wave feminism in which the film was produced. Oh, I see, so it's not the 7'2" alien xenomorph with razor-sharp teeth that is frightening, but it's women in the workplace being treated as equals? Makes perfect sense. I'd actually argue that this isn't a feminist movie, for the simple fact that Ripley, at no point, acts like a victim, or demands special treatment, or is treated in any way different than her male workmates. It's clear in the world that Alien is set in, that individuals, regardless of their gender, succeed or fail, based on their merit. You know, unlike modern-day feminism.
Pushy, stubborn, pushy, stubborn, bossy, bossy.
When I was growing up, I was called Bossy.
I think the word bossy is just a squasher.
Being labeled something matters. By middle school,
girls are less interested in leadership than boys.
I guess from a feminist perspective, Ripley is very lucky that the alien couldn't speak, because if it had uttered the mere word, bossy, she would have fallen in a heap and the alien would have had a free lunch. So no, Ripley isn't a good example of a feminist woman, because she doesn't spend her time making excuses, or playing victim. What she does, is, she gets the fucking job done. Ripley represents what modern-day feminists should be like, but aren't. Next. Alien opens with a birth sequence. It begins with darkness. Then, a series of lights illuminate to reveal the camera's position in a hallway on the spaceship Nostromo. As the camera floats forward through the hall, a door opens. The crew is revealed as slumbering, nearly naked bodies in the round, comforting, white womb of a room. Men and women lay side by side, born in a micro-society that is ignorant to the inhibitions associated with sexual difference. As the first member of the crew, Kane, rises from hypersleep, he is born into a series of dissolves that conveys the disorientation of birth into the brilliant light of the world at the same time that it provides a careful study of Kane's body as though he were a newborn being studied by its mother. Barbara Creed observes that this birth is a well-controlled, clean, painless affair, and speculates that it could be interpreted as a primal fantasy in which the human subject is born fully developed when copulation is redundant. This idea of a sterile birth both in terms of cleanliness and the inability to procreate is of great significance in the film as it removes the burden of pregnancy and birth from the female, creating the potential for male impregnation. Although the opening sequence could be interpreted as a birth sequence, I don't believe this is the most obvious or logical conclusion to make. Considering they're in hypersleep, then would not the opening sequence represent awakening, the regaining of consciousness, after sleep? And the hypersleep itself is a plot device to explain how they ended up off course. Next. The crew of the Nostromo enjoy a meal together, sitting around a table as if they were a nuclear family. All children of Mother, the Nostromo itself. The only audible conversation centers on issues of class as the ship's two mechanics complain that everybody else gets more money than us. That includes the ship's two women, Ripley and Lambert. At the time of the film's release in 1979, women were earning annual wages that amounted to just 60% of the earnings of their male counterparts too. The equalizing of women's pay is just one of the ways that Alien concerns itself with sexual equality. Men and women work together in similar roles in an equal distribution of labor. The film's characters have been stripped of their first names to further remove any sense of gender. We may be able to recognize that Ripley is female and Dallas is male, but the film does not. But what begins as sexual equality quickly becomes sexual confusion. Okay, the ship is a workplace, the crew are there to work and earn money. They have a job to do. They are there based on their merit, their abilities and hard work. Not based on their gender. This has nothing to do with gender identity, or sexual confusion. A workplace is a place you do work, it's not the place to discuss the philosophies of gender studies. Next. Sexual imagery abounds throughout Alien, transferred from the asexual, degendered crew to other aspects of the Degasis. When the crew goes out in search of the beacon, they find a ship that is constructed to resemble the lower half of a body, its legs angled up towards the heavens. Ash speaks for the entire crew when he declares, "I've never seen anything like it," a statement that speaks volumes about this society's understanding or lack thereof of the human body and of reproduction in general. No. He hasn't seen anything like it, because it's a fucking alien spacecraft. You know, not the type of thing you come across every day. Well, I don't anyway. It has nothing to do with human legs or reproduction. Next. The crew gains entrance to the ship through a vagina-like opening at the center point between its metallic legs. Once inside, they find themselves surrounded by walls that resemble bones and other organic material, furthering the sense that they are exploring the inside of a body. But the female genitalia are not alone as objects of fascination and Alien. Within the body of the ship, the crew discovers a giant, dead creature that is attached to the ship as though it had grown out of the floor. Extending from its midsection is what can only be described as a giant, erect penis, so giant, in fact, that it doesn't even fit in the shot. Its stiff, lifeless body is a warning to the explorers, but one that they are quick to ignore. All this is easily explained by Giger's style of art. Giger actually made models for the interiors of the ship, out of chicken bones and plaster, if I remember correctly. The concept was to create something totally alien, and never seen before, which he succeeded in doing. Yes, the space jockey is sitting in a chair that is attached to what resembles a giant penis-like structure, but once again this is not surprising considering it was designed by H.R. Giger. I don't believe there was any deeper sexual meaning from the creators of the movie. I don't believe Ridley Scott asked Giger to create a giant, erect penis. Next. Kane eagerly explores a cavern, a stand-in for the female's reproductive system, as though he and the crew were sperm racing towards one of the thousands of eggs inside. When Kane makes contact with the egg, a pregnancy occurs, just not in the way we are accustomed to. It is Kane who is impregnated by a scorpion-like monster that attaches itself to his face, raping him orally in an act of sexual domination. As Rebecca Belmiro describes, the scene couldn't be a more direct symbolic pictorialization of Freud's textbook phobia. The vagina with teeth clutches and eats alive the intrusive phallus, rendering it impotent, castrated. The implied phallic lack of the male crew of the Nostromo is made explicit by Kane's rape, his symbolic castration. This unlikely impregnation of Kane and the eventual birth of the alien monster are the film's most explicit examples of sexual confusion. The alien is child to Kane, a child birthed of man. It is this male perspective of powerlessness, a situation created by his assumption of the maternal role, the body that is penetrated rather than penetrating, that introduces the theme of male's anxiety in the face of feminism. Wow! Where do I start with this gibberish? I wonder, could there be a simpler inspiration for the alien's life cycle?
She's watching for the moment when it will finally split its skin and emerge as a chrysalis, because that is when she'll make her move. She crawls over the still soft chrysalis and gives it a final examination. Then, before its skin has a chance to harden, she sticks in her egg tube and pumps it full of eggs. The young wasps will hatch inside the chrysalis and eat the contents, so that instead of a cabbage-white butterfly bursting forth, out will come a multitude of wasps, ready to find more caterpillars to infest.
The glomerata wasp larvae lie just under its skin. Each is the size of a grain of rice, but together they account for over a third of the caterpillar's weight. The larvae have not yet finished growing and need to keep their host alive. To complete the next stage of their life cycle, they must break out. The caterpillar's thick skin should be a solid barrier to the parasitic wasp larvae. But as their bodies have grown, they have developed tiny, saw-like teeth. These jagged jaws are for one job only: cutting their way out. Stroke by stroke, the larvae slice through the tough layers of skin. As the larvae break through, there is nothing it can do.
Who knew that all those wildlife documentaries I watched as a kid were actually symbolic of male rape and castration, as well as symbolic of males' anxiety in the face of feminism? No wonder I became an MRA. So if a male becoming impregnated by an alien parasite is proof of misogyny, then what would the feminist perspective have been, if it had have been a female astronaut that became impregnated by an alien parasite? To answer this one, I'm going to defer to a very well-known feminist for her perspective. Take it away, Anita.
But one thing that I've learned from watching a lot of science fiction and fantasy television is you never, ever want to get pregnant on TV. Some of our most celebrated female characters come out of the sci-fi genre, but it's not all sunshine and roses. It's common practice for Hollywood writers to have their female characters become pregnant at some point in their TV series. These storylines are almost always built around women who have their ovaries harvested by aliens, who serve as human incubators for demon spawn, Basically, the characters are reduced to their biological functions. I'm sure you've seen this trope many times before. Remember back in the mid-90s on The X-Files when FBI agent Dana Scully found herself abducted and forcibly impregnated, which of course later culminated in a hybrid human-alien child. Deanna Troi from Star Trek The Next Generation is perhaps the quintessential example of the mystical impregnation trope, as her character's body and mind are regularly occupied, borrowed, violated, and invaded by alien beings. It's almost an unwritten rule that at some point during a sci-fi or fantasy television show, the writers will inseminate their female leads with some sort of ghastly pregnancy experience. The mystical pregnancy is one of the plot devices that I loathe the most, because while other tropes represent women in stereotypical ways, this one hits us on a biological level. Yes, some of us are physically capable of having babies, but no, that does not mean you get to take advantage of and abuse that for the sake of your story. Fanvidder Laura Shapiro calls the mystical pregnancy a type of reproductive terrorism because it makes becoming pregnant seem disgusting, frightening, and nightmarish. Laura goes on to say, the problem from my point of view is that pregnancy and birth are natural processes that are being distorted into torture porn, ways of punishing women, and exploiting their terror to up the dramatic stakes. This trope can't be brushed off as just entertainment. Human beings from the beginning of verbal storytelling have used narratives to understand ourselves and the world around us. When we hear a story repeated enough times, it can affect the way we think about reality. The mystical pregnancy is just another sexist narrative that exploits women for being female.
Okay, so if a female becomes pregnant with an alien parasite in a TV show or movie, it's because the writers are misogynists who are only using her body as an incubator. But, if a male becomes pregnant with an alien parasite, it's because of males' anxiety in the face of feminism. Why? It's almost as if, no matter what, everything is always sexist towards women. In reality, Ronald Shusett, who worked on the story with Dan O'Bannon, came up with the alien impregnation of a human as a plot device to get the alien on board the human's ship. You know, as Anita might say, they literally reduced him to an incubator. Well, I'm sure she would say it if the character was a female. It's simply a plot device, not a grand conspiracy by misogynists who are fearful of feminism and the female body, or are feeling castrated by female equality in the workforce, but simply a plot device to get the alien antagonist from point A to point B. As for some of the other inspiration behind Alien, in writing the script, O'Bannon drew inspiration from many previous works of science fiction and horror. He later stated that, I didn't steal Alien from anybody. I stole it from everybody. The Thing from Another World inspired the idea of professional men being pursued by a deadly alien creature through a claustrophobic environment. Forbidden Planet gave O'Bannon the idea of a ship being warned not to land, and then the crew being killed one by a mysterious creature when they defy the warning. Planet of the Vampires contains a scene in which the heroes discover a giant alien skeleton. This influenced the Nostromo crew's discovery of the alien creature in the derelict spacecraft. O'Bannon has also noted the influence of Junkyard, a short story by Clifford D. Simak in which a crew lands on an asteroid and discovers a chamber full of eggs. He has also cited as influences Strange Relations by Philip Joes Farmer, which covers alien reproduction, and various EC Comics horror titles carrying stories in which monsters eat their way out of people. I think this makes much more sense than male rape and castration, or males' anxiety in the face of feminism. I know this might be hard for some feminists to understand, but believe it or not, not everything is inspired by their vaginas. Next. In this sexually confused society where the penis is no longer the object of male power, the male's ultimate, unconscious fear of feminism is revealed, that sexual difference will be eliminated along with gender, leading to the equal distribution of reproductive duties, regardless of sex. Men will have to share the burden of pregnancy and birth. This anxiety in regards to feminism is founded on the notion that with the abolition of gender roles and the division of labor, the role of mother will become diminished unless it can be shared equally amongst both sexes. This concept, and the anxiety it creates, is on full display in Alien. In psychoanalytic terms, the idea of lack comes from the female's lack of a penis. However, in Alien, where sexuality is hopelessly confused, it can be said that the women also lack a vagina, necessitating the transfer of motherhood onto other objects, namely Kane and the film's multiple spaceships. A similar transfer of sexuality is encapsulated by the many ways in which the film presents the male's lack of a phallus. I'm not one to search for phallic symbols in art, but with Alien you don't have to look very hard to find them. Sexuality is woven into the design of virtually everything in the film, and not just for those critics who would unearth it in order to stroke their grand theory. Alien's most significant phallic imagery comes in the form of the monstrous alien itself. Rebecca Belmedro notes that, the alien reveals a frighteningly voracious sexuality, one that makes the crew members appear positively asexual by comparison. But critics can't seem to decide whether the alien represents the male or female. James H. Kavanaugh likens the alien to the phallus, noting that, through grotesquely emphasized erectile images, the alien insistently registers psychosexually as a threatening phallus. Amy Taubman sees the alien as a mix of both sexes, describing its mouth as hermaphroditic, while the devil jaws represented the inner and outer labia of the vagina dentata. The projectile movement of the inner jaw was a phallic threat. While there is ample critical discussion about vaginal imagery in the alien, the phallic teeth are what stand out most, not only because the likeness to the male member is more explicit than that of the inner and outer labia of the vagina dentata, but because it is the alien's phallic teeth that kill. The alien's process for killing its prey is a horrific display of phallic power, a giant erection, complete with teeth and dripping with semen like who shoots out of the alien's mouth to penetrate the flesh and destroy the brains of its victims. At this point I'm reminded of a story from the real Frank Zappa book. Page 84, if you wish to read it. Frank had written a song about his neighbors when he was young. The song was called, "Let's Make the Water Turn Black." Unbeknownst to Frank, some arsehole at MGM had censored some of his lyrics before the record went to print. The lyrics in question were, "And I still remember Mama, with her apron and her pad, feeding all the boys at Ed's Cafe." I think these lyrics are pretty clear. She is simply a waitress, taking orders with her pen and pad, but apparently someone at MGM saw it differently. As Frank goes on to say in his book, "I couldn't understand why anyone would chop that out. Years later I learned that an MGM executive was convinced that the word, pad, referred to a sanitary napkin. He became obsessed with the idea that a waitress somewhere was feeding sanitary napkins to people in a restaurant, and demanded, in violation of our contract, that it be removed. That guy needs to see a doctor." I don't deny that there are sexual influences in H.R. Geiger's work. In fact, that's one of my main arguments here, that this type of imagery is his style. But the writer of this article takes it way beyond that, and into the realm of absurdity. For example, the alien saliva becomes, dripping with semen like ooze. Let's use a bit of logic and think about this for a second. Not only does the dripping saliva show the alien's hunger, thus making it more threatening, but it also turns an inorganic costume into a believable organic alien's mouth. It's little details like this that make the creature believable, and without believability, you would have a comedy instead of a horror movie. And then there is the line. The phallic teeth are what stand out most, not only because the likeness to the male member is more explicit than that of the inner and outer labia of the vagina dentata, but because it is the alien's phallic teeth that kill. Really? What the writer describes as phallic teeth is in reality a weaponized tongue. I have to wonder if the author of this article sees airplanes as patriarchal sky penises. What shape exactly should the alien's tongue be? Cuboid? But let's not forget the inner and outer labia of the vagina dentata line. I honestly don't know how anyone could see this. For a start, the alien only has one set of lips, so I'm not exactly sure how you would get the inner and outer labia. Essentially, the author is saying that any mouth could be symbolic of vagina dentata. And here I thought Jaws was about a huge shark that ate people, but in reality, it's about males fearing female empowerment, symbolized by a giant-toothed vagina. Makes perfect sense. Like I said earlier, sometimes a train entering a tunnel is just a fucking train entering a tunnel. What I find puzzling about the feminist perspective of the alien is they don't seem to be able to agree on what it symbolizes, or at least what gender it symbolizes. Our earlier feminist critic claimed it represented the fear of the feminine. Now we hear that it might be hermaphroditic, or even masculine. It would seem that critics have a lot of room for interpretation. I even remember seeing a TV review of Alien 3 in the 90s, where the reviewer claimed that the alien was symbolic of the AIDS virus. And I guess in a way, good art should be open to interpretation, at least within reason. I guess in a way, good art can act as a type of Rorschach ink blot, and the viewer can interpret it based on their own emotional functioning, internal conflict, and state of mind. In other words, someone's interpretation often reveals more about the person making the interpretation than it does the art in question. I think it's pretty clear that anyone who would interpret these Frank Zappa lyrics as feeding used sanitary napkins to truckers would have a great level of mental deviancy. In other words, they are fucking sick in the head. Seriously, it's simply not an interpretation made by a normal healthy functioning brain. It's the type of interpretation that would be made by an individual who sees sexual deviancy everywhere, while not realizing they are looking at the world through the lens of their own twisted mind. And I think it's safe to say that the exact same thing could be said about the writer of this article, when he uses lines like, inner and outer labia of the vagina dentata, and, killing its prey is a horrific display of phallic power, and, dripping with semen like hose. Why does the alien need to be interpreted through the lens of human gender? Why can't it just be an alien? I can't help but think of this guy, sitting in the corner of a darkened room, naked, jerking off with one hand, while flagellating himself with the other. You know the type, someone both obsessed and disgusted with their own sexuality, at the same time. And because that image is now going to give me nightmares, I'm going to end this video here. But there is still a lot of the second article to get through, so I guess that means a part 2 sometime in the future. Until then folks, beware of vagina dentata, and always remember, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.